Here's Sims. It's a good serve this from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it! Just a minute to play. Plus stoppage time. Here's Letizia! Oh, better to say farewell than one of the finest players ever to wear the red and white.
Hello and welcome. It is episode 107 of the Saints FC podcast. And before I introduce my guests, I've just realised that that intro now is only players of yesteryear. There are no real, officially current players in that yet. Josh Sims is out on loan. Shane Long is out on loan. Obviously, Letizia doesn't even get Soccer Saturday these days. And then obviously we're going back to 1976 for the rest. But there we go. They're all players of yesteryear now, that intro. Gosh, there's some pondering. Opposite me on my screen, I can see the marvellous Tom Parker, who's wearing a lovely beard at the moment. His hair's looking a little bit more fluffy than normal. And back on the podcast again, we're delighted to have him, or I would have been delighted to have him had we not lost 9-0 to the team that he supported in the run-up to this episode. I've got Carl Anka. Carl, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, we did this sort of before we started recording, didn't we? And I think other than football, I'm okay. Football is not okay right now, though.
It's just a lot of football. The good thing is there's so much football you can't really dwell on the single bad result for too long.
No, you just have to dwell on like a cluster of 5 of them together.
Yeah, that feature one goal for your team.
Yeah,
it was a good goal.
More than one. Yeah, it's terrible goals for us.
Yeah,
everything's going wrong for Saints.
Everything's going wrong for you already, Tom, as well.
It is, yeah. I've had a block out of Saturday. That's how traumatic it was.
This is one of those episodes where I was sort of hoping to put off recording this episode for long enough that we could just wait until we had a win and then we could record and there could be some level of optimism. But that hasn't happened, which means that the last time we recorded, Tom, since then we've lost to Villa. We could say Southampton 0, Mike Dean and Lee Mason 1. We've lost to Man United. Again, Mike Dean and Lee Mason having a bit of a role to play in that one as well. Although the loss is the loss. We'll get to the scoreline. And we've lost to Newcastle as well. A down to 9 men Newcastle. I don't want to spend too long talking about the Aston Villa because it's sort of in the annals of history now. But Carl, I don't know if you watched this game. Probably not, but seeing as I don't know if you have that same level of interest. But
I try and watch a Southampton game where possible. So I'm trying to have a 3-game curb on the weekend fixtures. So you can just spend the entire day from 12 until 10 o'clock now watching games on a Saturday, especially. And then if you added the European games as well from Germany and Spain and whatnot, you can end up watching 7, maybe 10 games in a weekend. And I did that once during these COVID times. I went, no, too much. That was far too indulgent. So now I try to make sure I only watch 3 in a weekend live. At least, when I'm sat down from 90 to 90 for the 90 minutes. So one of them often tends to be the Manchester United game because it's my job. And then match 2 very often now tends to be a Southampton game because I'm curious as to see how Ralph's plucky Saints get on. And the 3rd game tends to be my sort of potluck, whoever takes my fancy. So I did watch a little bit of this game also because I am also very interested in what Aston Villa are doing right now. And yeah, that game was odd. Well boxed. Two of the most improved sides from season to season, in my opinion. And while I don't like to talk about referees too much, and from last season, Ralph Hasson doesn't like to spend too much time talking about referees, even though he's, you can see him when he's being asked, he's like, yeah, whatever, move on. That was a annoying defeat, shall we say, if we can call the Aston Villa one annoying, the Manchester United one farcical, and then the Newcastle one frustrating. Does that work out for you?
Yeah, I think so. There we go. All wrapped up. 5 minutes. Carl's done it.
Sweet.
Well, I think it's a good point, isn't it? Because 3 games to lose in completely different ways, which is I'm not maybe as despondent as some of the Saints fans. I don't know. I'd love to know if Saints fans are just more despondent or more hysterical than other football fans. I imagine that all football fans are a bit like this, but the fact that it's 3 completely different games almost gives me reason for hope. Is that a weird way to look at it?
No, that's fine. That's fine. I did dip my toe back into writing about Southampton last week after the second 9-0 result on the Athletic.
You know what? I think we can mention both 9. Like, there's no point in us trying to skirt around this issue. Let's face it. This episode of the Saints FC podcast is gonna go for the jugular. We're gonna reach out and grasp both those 9-0s. I think in this episode.
Okay, so we can say it ended 9-0
yeah.
as well. We don't have to do that in that certain scoreline. We're going to say it was a 9-0.
Yeah.
Right, good. And I wrote about a piece about that 9-0, and I said it is a really interesting thing in that, there's been 11 9-0s in the 133 history of the English top flight, and 11 of them in 133 years, 2 of them have happened in 466 days, and those 2 have both happened to Ralph Hasson Hall, Southampton. I tried working out the probability of someone watching those 2 games, and my calculator broke. And I simply bought a lottery ticket because I went, well, if the odds are this weird, I may as well have a punt in the lottery. Yeah, it's a really weird spell for Southampton right now. But I think what's really interesting is I don't think Ralph Hasson Hall's really suffered much denting to his reputation, at least among Southampton fans. Southampton fans are very much, from what I'm seeing, are using the I stand with Ralph hashtag. There is 0 to maybe 2% chance that Ralph is removed from his job. There seems to be a 0% chance that Ralph Hasson is going to walk. So, yeah, a result that should mean a lot and would normally mean a lot, that probably isn't going to mean lickety split by the end of the season. Isn't that weird?
I think it will mean something, but in the context that you've just presented it, it's not going to mean an immediate job loss or an immediate amount of pressure. I think it's more going to be the games around that result, because you can take that as a bit of a freak. And I think anyone who watched it could see that the game was a bit of a freak game. Where everything sort of that could go wrong did go wrong in very calamitous fashion. I mean, if we just sort of relive it a little bit, I think probably the first thing that we got wrong was the ref. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all 9 goals.
God,
we don't have long enough for that.
No.
Having sat there for both,
yeah,
live and direct in the flesh, I will tell you So the Leicester game, when it got to 3-0, I remember telling my boss, Southampton are capitulating here. Something bad is about to happen. And I remember fans leaving St Mary's at 3-0, and it just kept happening. And it looked as if every single time Leicester were going forward, they scored goals, and it was 5-0 at half time. And it was that sort of they're getting brutalised. Whereas Manchester United, it was 4-0 at half time, and I said, it doesn't feel like the 9-0, but it doesn't not feel like the 9-0. And there were, a couple of fans from other football clubs having a pop going, Carl, it's like the 9-0 again. I was like, no, it isn't. Shut up. Because I don't want to be the person that watches 2 9-0s in back-to-back seasons, frankly. And I think it was only around 6 that I went, oh no, it's happening again. And I very much went from describing how the goals were happening up until the 5th goal to when I got to 6, I went, yeah, it's 6. Yeah, it's 7. Yeah, it's 8. Yeah, it's 9. In that sort of despondent thing. And it's that very odd feeling where there are a lot of very happy Manchester United fans last week. There are a lot of very happy Manchester United fans who wanted me to record another issue of my Manchester United podcast. And I was just sort of sat there like, yeah, yeah, I guess it was cool. It was a record-breaking win. I guess I can explain the tactics. Just going, oh, Ralph, why has it happened again?
I mean, what?
It's weird though, 'cause we're not bad. This is the weird thing for your point about it being so improbable to lose 9-0.
It was farcical, right? So Leicester City was Leicester had a plan, and they went, we're going to do this over and over and over again, and we're going to beat you up until you cry, right? And Manchester United was sort of like, oh, there's a weird opportunity here. Let's just have a go and see what's possible. And some players there were really, really on it. Scott McTominay went, keep going, lads, at 4-0. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer on the 81st minute went, keep going. And there's the bit when Daniel James scores to make it 9, where Scott McTominay tells Daniel James to get the ball because he wants to get 10. So some players were really, really like, oh yeah, let's score as many goals as possible. Whereas there are others who were like, I mean, I want to play football, but I'm not like, I don't need to do this. So you saw some very strange things. You know, the fact that Fred played left back, the fact that Ollie very much sensed the opportunity and went, oh, this is a really good chance to get Martial a goal to get his confidence back. And then he got a goal and a very strange penalty. As Bednarak said, it's not the foul. Is that that's my Bednarak impression? So it was farcical. The first half was, this is a very, very weak Southampton team with a lot of injuries and a lot of suspensions and a lot of problems being beaten up. And the second half was just basically a training ground routine that, unfortunately, you conceded 5 goals. It was. I always use the word weird or peculiar or unusual, but it did not feel in the same way that the Leicester defeat felt. The Leicester defeat felt as if Leicester deliberately went out to hurt you. And the Manchester United one just simply felt as if someone was going, someone's not left their back door locked. Let's just nick everything.
I guess as well, like Leicester being at home, Leicester being in the pouring rain.
Yep.
Leicester being in front of a crowd, all of these things. I mean, football is weird, isn't it, at the moment without crowds, and things that are happening because of the lack of crowds, for good or for worse. And I think that's probably what marks the Leicester game out, isn't it? Standing there, end of October, hands on hips, pouring rain.
Yes.
At 9-0 with, 30,000 people in the ground sort of not knowing what they're watching. Whereas, you're right, almost the Man United game by then had sort of the feeling of like a pre-season friendly, where like a Southampton go and play some third division Austrian team and spank them like 9-0. It felt like that. It was just very strange.
I think we could really do with spanking a team 9-0. I think it would exercise a lot of ghosts. I mean, if we touch on some of the things which I think were different between this 9-0 and the last 9-0, in Ralph's words, and apologies, listener, because we're going to have a swear, but we're directly quoting from Ralph here. But he said the difference between this 9-0 and the last 9-0 was that during the last 9-0 we were shit, which I think is probably fair. And it's a funny thing because I think at that time of the season, people still had belief, like Ralph had turned things around after Mark Hughes. Things were obviously better. We expected things to get a lot better after the summer, and then it just wasn't clicking that first half of the season, with the exception of beating Portsmouth 4-0, which was very enjoyable. It wasn't really clicking, and we were a bit rubbish. And yeah, you're right, Leicester had figured us out. Bertrand got sent off, and it was scary and horrible, and they totally beat us up doing the same thing over and over again. I think they created 25 chances in that game against us, which was horrendous. So there's that difference. The Man United game, obviously, we went there with a much depleted squad, although I think you can perhaps ask some questions about Ralph on the starting lineup, maybe just one position, maybe the Gineppo being on for Jankovic instead from the starting lineup, making him start in that. I don't know. But, Jankovic has also put in a transfer request a week before. There's been loads of talk about him. Barcelona are watching him. Apparently he's got the highest ceiling in terms of skill sets at the club. So obviously Ralph didn't expect him to go and stamp on or, do a vertical, horizontal, flying karate kick on McTominay within 70 odd seconds. Nobody was expecting that. And then I think the other thing which was different as well is like Leicester just totally destroyed us doing the same thing over and over again. It never looked like Southampton were going to score. Whereas I think in this game, We did get a legitimate goal, which I felt was ruled out. And I think maybe we can ask a question on how is VAR doing the right thing, but we might not have time for that in this episode. And then I think at 6-0, I think that would have sort of been a fair place to end the match. And then I think the Bednarek-Marshall penalty, which has obviously been overturned, it made those last 5-6 minutes a farce again, didn't it? We were already broken. And then it was like, if we use your analogy of Man United realised the back door was open and nicked everything, I think at 6-0, Mike Dean just stood there holding the door so that they could get some of the bigger bits out that they perhaps couldn't when there was just, one of them working at it. Do you know what I mean?
They're uniquely horrible. Man United with players like that aren't even their good players, like Dan James, that are still basically Olympic sprinters. And they're able to bring, they're almost like uniquely placed, aren't they, as a team with Martial, Rashford, Greenwood, that have players that are Dan James that can really hurt you when you're down. And Saints just were more than down; they were out, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like. So we've got lots of excuses, and I've just run through some of them because I'm trying to defend my club whilst they're lying battered and bruised on the floor. But there's also some things that we don't have excuses for. We had a lot of players on the pitch that are senior, should have done better, should have stood up and taken responsibility. Alex McCarthy should have done better. Ryan Bertrand was on the pitch for the game. So was Danny Ings. So was Che Adams. James Ward-Prowse, who's our captain, and all of those guys wilted away, like little flowers in the heat. Yeah, Stuart Armstrong. There were enough senior players on the pitch some of whom have experienced the whole thing before, who should have stood up and been counted. And even if that is, put Danny Ings back in defence, we know he can tackle, we know he can head. That something should have happened to prevent it being 9-0.
But I love Ralph, and I will defend Ralph. He's the best manager we've had in donkey's years, and we ain't going to get a better manager. But there was something quite strange about, like his faith in Jankovic is quite, incredible, isn't it? To chuck him in for that game, having handed in a transfer request, allegedly, having, barely come off the bench, didn't even start the FA Cup game against Shrewsbury. And then, Stuart Armstrong, you would have thought that maybe the better move was to play Stuart Armstrong in the centre and, play Redmond or Gineppo on the wing instead of Armstrong to bring in a bit more experience. And we just kind of, I've not really seen it before. Like, they just totally fell to pieces, didn't they, with the Jankovic sending off? They just lost their collective mind. But you don't know with Ralph whether Ralph is either. There's a number of things. Like either Ralph genuinely thinks Jankovic was the best central midfield option or the only central midfield option he had available for the game, or option B, he's sending a message to Jankovic saying, "Okay, well, if you think you're really that good, come on then." Or option C, he's sending a message to the board saying, "You need to invest more because otherwise I'm going to have to throw kids in, and this is what happens when you throw kids in." It might be a combination of all those things, but it was a weird team selection.
I think this, you get moments like this with managers that use the word philosophy, right? So I am not a fan of the word philosophy in football. I don't think there's philosophy behind playing 4-4-2 or playing your third choice right back at left back. And I always prefer to break up into 3 strands of tactics and strategy. But when a manager uses the word philosophy, that tends to mean they prefer to refine plan A rather than develop a plan B. And when Ralph said there was shit, sorry for the swear, after the first 9-0, one of the things that was around the turnaround was they were playing that 3-5-2 shape that he didn't really believe in, and they swapped to a 4-2-2-2 shape. And that he moved James Ward-Prowse in the middle, Jack Stevens came in, Dan Ings did certain things, and there was a sort of death or glory approach to Southampton after the first 9-0. It was Ralph going, okay, well, you didn't do it your way, so now you're going to have to do it my way. And now we're going to play Ralph ball. And that was going on. And then, after that run in the December-January period where Southampton got really, really good, and eventually the Project Restart thing, he perfected or got close to bringing his version of Hasson Hall ball to Southampton. And, you've seen the improvements on that again. So one thing that's really surprised me every time I watch Southampton now is how basically they're ahead of schedule. I didn't see Ori Romeo being this good. I didn't see Vestergaard being this good. I certainly didn't see Southampton go from a team that used Shane Long to hold up the ball to a team that no longer needs Shane Long to hold up the ball. And that's really, really impressive. And I think there is so much credit in the bank and there's such a good head of steam on this Southampton team that Ralph considered like, yeah, I don't need to place Stuart Armstrong in the middle because I can teach these youngsters what to do now. I spent all of the first lockdown, come up with this playbook. I've got the whole under-23 team doing this B team thing. And now everyone, in theory, on the under-23 level understands exactly what I need them to do in their position. So I can see why Ralph Hasson Hall would go, yeah, I don't need to play Armstrong in central midfield. Jankovic knows what he needs to do in central midfield. I'm the sort of manager that the reason Jankovic is at Southampton is because he's been told when these opportunities come, I'm going to play him there. So I can see why that happens. And it was a really, really unfortunate sending off. And my heart goes out to him for not only the sending off, but the terrible racist abuse he endured afterwards as well. And I think that bit's fine. The worrying concern, and the thing that Ralph said was basically at the back of your mind, Dan Sheldon, our reporter from the Athletic at Southampton, basically asked Ralph in the press conference afterwards, going, did at any point in that game did you go, oh God, it's happening again? And Hassan will admit, you do have this thought at the back of your mind when it gets to a certain scoreline, oh, this could be happening. And again, I think this is one of those things when you're a manager that uses the word philosophy, when you believe that there is a certain way of playing football, and rather than develop a plan B when that certain way doesn't work, you just want to refine your plan A. There is something about Southampton that when it's not going to plan, it can. And typically, that's when Southampton throw away points from a winning position, right? That's when you go from being 2-0 up against Wolves to losing 3-2 because you still haven't figured out a way to play against two up front. Or that's how David Moyes' West Ham tends to get the better of you because they have played two up front. And that's what normally happens, right? While this Southampton team are good at certain things, they have weaknesses against direct opponents in a certain way. And you can get at this Southampton in a way. And I think another one of these frailties is, unfortunately, when things get really, really bad, and I think what's become really apparent is one very quick way for this Southampton team to go from maybe being a Europa League quality team to being I'm not going to say relegation candidate, but a thoroughly mid-table team is your fullbacks, because your fullbacks are so important to how you play football, both in attack and defence. And not only is it issues you had at central midfield, but the fact that you had another relative newbie in Kane Ramsey playing a right back. And what happened was Manchester United, who on average direct anywhere between 35 to sometimes 50% of their attacks down the left-hand side, had Luke Shaw and Marcus Rashford go, oh, we can just run at this guy. Let's just do that all day. So a lot of the goals, 2 goals in the first half came from Luke Shaw assists down there. Another goal came from Marcus Rashford on the right-hand side doing the Leicester City thing of we're just going to drag you down to one channel and then switch it round to the other channel, which is a known way to score against a Red Bull team. Southampton aren't a Red Bull team, but Southampton play like a Red Bull team because of Hassan Hall's experience at Leipzig as well. So I think that's what happened. And I think that's what can happen in Southampton and some of the Red Bull teams. You know, there's no shame in having 5 goals plus put on you by Manchester United, because Manchester United went, oh, look, Red Bull Leipzig. If we just do, yeah, cool. Manchester United beat Red Bull Leipzig 5-0 at Manchester at Old Trafford. This can happen. And I think what happened, unfortunately, was a perfect storm of hubris, unease, and naivete that allowed a Manchester United team that really wanted to get some goals to get as many goals as they wanted.
But does that naivety? I mean, I think we'll talk about the bigger issues, but some of the decisions to let players go on loan, just baffling. You know, like Valerie Valerie is not maybe the player we hoped he would become yet, but he does have a decent amount of Premier League experience under his belt, and it did seem, you know, him and letting Vokins go on loan. To your point, the fullbacks are so important for Saints, and we've essentially let the 2 understudies go without bringing in any replacements. It just seems very odd.
So at the end of last season, I was asked to write a season review for Southampton, and I argued that the most important player for Southampton in 2020-2021 is Jake Vokins. And I said, Jake Vokins is the clearest sign as to where Southampton's going to be, or how Southampton is going to get to where they need to be next season. And I said, if Ralph loans out Jake Vokins, that's Ralph going, I want to get into the Europa League this season, because I'm not going to wait to teach this boy what I need him to learn. Whereas if Ralph keeps Vokins in and goes, okay, I'll teach you the essentials, that was him going, I don't mind finishing 12th, or anywhere between 12th and 14th. And I that was my true sort of, he's the bellwether test, because I think, and forgive me for what I'm about to say, but when Burnley were taking over, and the gentleman took over Burnley, made a comment towards Southampton's academy. I think there was a lot of conversation about the gentleman from Burnley said Southampton's academy isn't what they used to be. And some very nice Southampton people went, that's absolute balderdash. And Southampton's academy is as good as it's ever been. I don't think Southampton's academy is as good as people think, because if it was, I don't think Hasson Hall would have spent 110 days coming up with a playbook telling those players what he needs to do. I think there are a handful. I think there's basically a missing academy graduate class. I think there's a handful of players who are either in the cusp of making the first team or should have made the first team, that Hasson Hall arrived at Southampton and going, you can't play against the ball, or you can't work out of possession the way it wants. And when you look at, Southampton have 4 key tenets, and 3 of them are what you do when you don't have the ball. And I think Hasson Hall has given opportunity and time to some of these players. He's spoken a lot about some of these players and what they need to do. He's been very, very vocal about Jake Vokins and how Vokins used to be a winger and needs to be braver in his one-on-ones. And I think I really thought if he kept Vokins in there, and if he went, okay, Vokins, I'm going to teach you everything I need you to do in-house, then that was a sign Ralph was going, it's not this season, it's next season. And I think what's happened is, while they are nominally understudies, I don't think they're Ralph understudies, if that makes sense. And I think for a manager who can be so meticulous and precise as Hasson Hall, if you're not going to learn, or you're not going to develop in the way that he wants you to develop, you may as well not be here. And I think that's why those 2 gentlemen are on loan. And I think, again, that is why that's the concern when you have a manager that talks about philosophy, because that's a very stubborn thing to do. And unfortunately, that means you run the risk of losing 9-0 every once in a while.
I mean, it does seem strange. We've gone on like an interesting tangent here, I think, with the whole Jake Vokins thing. I mean, especially because, I mean, if we look at those 2 loan moves, I mean, I was baffled by this because someone at Sunderland sort of contacted me, one of the Sunderland podcasts contacted me like 5 days before it was announced that Vokins was going. And I just couldn't believe that he was telling me the truth. I was like, I'm not going to waste my time speaking to you until I know this is going to happen. And in the end, he eventually convinced me he did know. And he was right. But it did seem really strange that we've sort of loaned those players out. And this was, I think, about a week or a week and a half after we'd said in an interview, I can't remember who was being, but one of the Southampton executives was being interviewed, and they said that, we're not going to loan out players that we think have got a place in, the squad. So I think if you read between the lines, that means Valerie and Vokins are not part of the Southampton future. I mean,
I'm pulling a face. I'm wincing a bit.
Yeah. You're not sure? You don't think that sounds like... Because, I mean, having watched Vokins and Valerie in Premier League games this season, it's clear that both of them need to get some more practice at defending, I think. They both look quite exciting going forward. Obviously, Valerie scored a great goal at Old Trafford. It wasn't last season, the season before.
Okay. And then last season, Valerie was the player that Leicester City targeted in the first 9-0.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? But, I mean, we had Ryan Bertrand at left back at Old Trafford, Carl.
You did, and you didn't concede that many goals down that flank. Notice the wince.
Yeah.
I don't think Kane Ramsey actually played bad.
No, I don't think he played bad.
It wasn't his fault.
He didn't play bad. He was just green. And I think there are a few terrible feelings you can get in sport. One of them is when you're playing against someone who is faster than you and that knows they're faster than you and then starts going, oh, I can just outrun you, and we'll just repeatedly try and do that. And I think another terrible feeling you have in sport is when a team has identified you as a weak link and go, bring the ball here, we can get past him. And I think both of those things happened at Old Trafford. Mm-hmm. It was Kane Ramsey knowing, it was Marcus Rashford knowing that he was faster than Kane Ramsey, and Manchester United as a team being very left side dominant. And Luke Shaw is in a very, very good run of form at the moment. He's probably the second choice for player of the season at United after Bruno Fernandes. And in a United team that already directs all their play down the left, Shaw is in great amount of form. And you had Marcus Rashford, who is faster than Kane Ramsey, is a very direct runner, and basically had Ramsey running backwards. And it didn't really matter who you were playing at right back that day. It was just two players in very good form going, now.
I don't think they're the same change out of Carl Walker-Peters.
Neither do I. I think there is a better Southampton right back in that squad who would not have been the target of so much.
Yeah, there's a. So Dan Sheldon had it, and Walker-Peters explained how Southampton defend, and it's this very interesting thing of, as a right back, despite being a right back, Walker-Peters is responsible for defending the attacker who goes towards Bednarek. So he will tuck inside and then help double up on that one striker, and then Bednarek will deal with one other player, and then they all sort of shuffle over, which I thought was a really interesting schematic. And then person on the left, number 10, will tuck inside again. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That even though you've got a back five, you more or less defend as a back 3 plus 1 every now and again. I would recommend that interview to anyone. And the way Walker-Peters explained that, and you're going, but you only signed us in January, and you've already sort of downloaded the Hasson Hall system, and you've had all this put into your brain. And I think that is as important as whatnot. I have had conversations with Jan Valery, and I have had conversation with Jake Vokins, and I still haven't quite got the sense that they acutely understand the demands of the Hasson Hall system. Because the demands of that's not a slight on those two gentlemen. That's just more on the book reading and perceptiveness on Kyle Walker-Peters. What Hasson Hall wants from his players, especially his wide players, is difficult. You're not playing like a typical fullback. You're not behaving like a typical wide player. And I think this is also why Stuart Armstrong probably can't just slot into the central midfield place now, because Ori Romeo, there's another interview with him. You ask Romeo, what do you need to do as a number 6? And he says, well, I can close my eyes now and say, I need to move this way, and then move to that way, I need to do this, and I need to do that, I need to do this. And I suppose this is why when things go bad in Arsenal system, things can go really bad, because you have to download such a large playbook in your head that you can, I guess you can say you can short circuit, because you're going, what am I supposed to do now? Oh God, do I follow Ralph's instructions, or do I play football so I don't get embarrassed anymore?
I mean, Duncan Alexander, who we've had on this podcast before, I think described it beautifully, that Southampton are like the Death Star, whereas, we're quite good, quite effective, but we have, a flaw, which once you get at it, we just explode, which, yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because they do seem to be, I think we'll talk about that more generally, but they just seem to be lost, don't they, at the moment? They seem to, just forgotten everything. It's a funny thing.
Do you think in their heads they're trying to flick back to page 500? What do you do in the face of a potential 9-0? I can't remember what Ralph told me at this point. What do we do? Panic. But it's an interesting point, Carl. And I think, some of the players that we've seen come on and start to do really well under Ralph are probably players that you would describe as very intelligent. So I think you look at Valery and Vokins and you can see they're raw and they've got talent. Whereas Kyle Walker-Peters, I think probably when we first got him on loan, you're like, this guy's really small, and is he strong? Is he going to win a header?
I wouldn't say intelligent is the right word. I'd say fresh.
fresh.
As in a fresh slate. So one of the most telling things when Ralph likes to play is he'll describe you as open-minded, right? That's his compliment for good. He goes, he's a very good player. He's very brave in his one-on-ones, and he's open-minded, which is basically code for he does what I tell him to do.
Yeah.
Right. But
is there willing to learn as well as also actually being able to learn? Is it complicated? Because when you look
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Right. I think now, look at Ralph's track record on the transfer market. He wants younger players. He wants guys that are under the age of 24, and he wants them to be immobile, and he wants them to be able to play in 2 or 3 different positions. But I think one of the most important things about that is the age, right? He wants them under the age of 24. He wants them before their learnings have calcified, before they've got too much of another club or what another coach has said. He wants them raw. Kyle Walker-Peters is one of the best players to Hasson system, because Kyle Walker-Peters has barely played senior team football before Ralph got his hands on him, right? He's gone, you've done a bit of academy football, you've done a bit on 23 football. Sweet. I'm going to teach you everything. And Walker-Peters, I wouldn't say desperate to play, but Walker-Peters with a point to prove and to say, I want to be a Premier League football player, probably did everything Ralph said. And that's why he's so good in that system. Where Vokins has, up until the age of 15, he was a winger, and there's a little bit more on that, and there's a little bit more on that, and now he's got to a system where he's gone, well, I know a bit of this, I know a bit of this, I know a bit of this, and I'm not only trying to have to learn your system, I'm also trying to have to unlearn 2 or 3 other systems. And I think that is a big thing. And I think this is also why Southampton hasn't or a perfect fit, because he's like, okay, I don't mind if you're not going to give me loads of money if you just give me your academy, because that way I don't need to unlearn anything. I can just give all these young people the raw data they need, which is probably why he gave Jankovic the place there. It's that perfect storm, the implant that led to a 9-0.
Right. I'm just going to throw in say 6-1 or 7-1 would have been a fair score, and I think we could live with that. And I'm putting that on Mike Dean and Lee Mason, who I'm also saying that Southampton should have beaten Aston Villa 3-1 at least, or perhaps 2-1 in that game, had it not been for them. However, I do not condone sending death threats to any of them or their family, which is totally stupid. And Carl, on your point as well about Jankovic, is just like the abuse that he's had has just been utterly ridiculous. And this is where football fans are morons across the world and just need to just stop being so pathetic and horrible.
Right. It's only a game.
Ridiculous stuff, and I hope that none of those people involved are true Southampton fans, because it's embarrassing as well as appalling. Which means that we need to move on to the Newcastle game, and we were talking this one up. I think Ralph was saying that sometimes like the kind of reactive blow, the retaliation punch is the strongest, and Southampton were talking this up in a way that suggested they were going to come out and blow Newcastle United away, completely destroy them. And, well, I mean, we all know what happened. It all went kind of Pete Tong again. And I was slightly annoyed by this maybe arrogant way of, we've just been beaten 9-0. Like, yes, you can say we're going to have a reaction, but I think we probably talked things up in a way which is now looking quite embarrassing when you look at the result. And the way that first half went was a total shambles again.
This was the true Everton to the Leicester game, wasn't it?
Oh, it's not that bad.
No, but I think,
I still maintain the Everton defeat was worse than a 9-0.
Yes.
Southampton played worse in the Everton game than he did a 9-0.
The Newcastle game, while it wasn't as bad, and whilst, of course, we scored 2 goals, there was almost so many calamitous things wrong with the way we approached the game. Almost like Newcastle were there, they were just going to roll over. And for me, it's a more frustrating game than the Man United game. The Man United game's a freak. It happens. Great teams punish, weakness, like you said, and they punish it unrelentingly and without mercy. Newcastle are not a great team. And Southampton made them look very good. What they do have is one of the best footballers I've ever seen is Saint Maximilian. And Saints just they can't get near him, can they?
I think. I mean, if this makes you feel any better, and I don't think it will, but I will say Newcastle are different from the Newcastle at the start of this season. So the victory they got over Everton, this new coach they have, Graham, his surname escapes me, so please forgive me, listeners. But I think...
Carl, don't worry, our listeners aren't that hot on Newcastle coaches, so Graham is fine.
Jones, so a regular name.
So Newcastle have got a new coach called Graham Doe. I'll call him Graham Doe. I'm really sorry, your surname escapes me completely right now. And he seems to be brought in to help with the more pernickety tactical stuff, because Steve Bruce seems to have come to the conclusion that that's not his area of expertise. And Newcastle are better. They've got a newer flavour to them. They've got this sort of lopsided, asymmetrical 4-4-2 diamond. Callum Wilson got injured and whatnot, but they're not the Steve Bruce struggle ball that you may have seen at the start of the season, and that is going to be found out in 5 or 6 games, because this is match 2, and then we'll eventually reach a point in time where Newcastle will play someone big and they'll get a result, and then everyone go, oh wait, Newcastle aren't terrible anymore. So I think, one, you've caught Newcastle as they're on a bit of an upward drift. And 2, that game was there for the taking. I think the really disappointing thing, and this was my sort of, I'm going to watch the Southampton game and then I'm going to watch the Manchester United game today. It was the third goal just before half time, where you very much endeavoured to shoot yourself in the foot. And I think that game, at 2-1, Minamino's got his debut goal. 2-1, things are going okay. But when it gets to 3-1, I'm just going, that's bad. And it was one of those, I've got a very good Russian football fan who supports Liverpool, and he describes a goal scored anywhere after the 40th minute as a goal for the dressing room. And he goes, those goals cost more because it changed your team talk, which means your manager can't give your proper teamwork talk. He's like, oh God, I've got 5 minutes to redo the entire thing. And he goes, always beware the goal for the dressing room. And I think that third goal from Miguel Almiron was very much a goal for the dressing room, and Hasson Hall, meticulous, very precise, is going, okay, here's the plan, and here's how we're going to get to 2-2, and here's how we're going to eventually beat them, is then going to have to change his team talk. And I mean, credit to James Ward-Prowse, that was a fantastic free kick. I think that's his 9th or 10th direct free kick.
I think it's 9th in the Premier League, is it?
Yeah.
And he's had some in the Cup as well.
9th in the Premier League.
This game, where do you want to begin on where it goes?
Well, I mean, one of the things which maybe if you go back to the 9-0, the one area where we do have a deputy who is capable, and okay, he's not capable in all areas that Alex McCarthy is, but you think, what happened to Angus Gunn when we lost 9-0 to Leicester? He was taken out of the firing line, he was given a rest, he was given a break because it's so demoralising. Alex McCarthy's sort of managed to get those mistakes out of him for the most part of this season, and then I think, the facing... I mean, if we go back as well, just comparing the Leicester, that was 24 shots Leicester had and they scored 9. Manchester United had 14 shots and scored 9. So McCarthy's practically stopped nothing at all in that game. And his confidence is gone, and this was dreadful. And actually, the funny thing is, Fraser Forster, his biggest weakness on McCarthy is his distribution and his kicking. He wouldn't have made that mistake because he would have absolutely walloped it up the pitch. So he wouldn't have had that goal for the dressing room. So that's one of the things. I think that goal is really the key turning point. But then, yes, that's a real pain. But then James Ward-Prowse scores that free kick on the 47th minute, which means you then have pretty much the whole second half to get one goal against a team that first then goes down to 10 men and then goes down to 9 men.
And loses their best player.
Yeah.
And has a pretty threadbare bench. I mean, This is what was amazingly frustrating about it, was there was a a combination of Saints completely shooting themselves in the foot. Every goal really was, Saints were culpable in some way. Bednarek throwing himself at Saint-Maximin for the first. what I don't. Sam Maximilian had them on toast from the very beginning of the game. Bednarek, who Ralph loves, sort of just seems a bit naive, doesn't he? Like in that sort of situation, and it just they couldn't get to grips with Sam Maximilian, and they sort of didn't really know what they were doing, and it just fell to pieces again. For me, like by the time they were 2-0 down, they fell to pieces.
I'm lightly chuckling, but it's not funny. I'm sorry. I'm lightly chuckling because I've been there, and I've been at St James's Park as Southampton. I nearly said United there. I'm very sorry. I've been at St James's Park when Southampton have played a Newcastle team that were there for the taking, and they just couldn't understand what they were playing against. And I think Sam Maximin and Miguel Almiron are the two sort of players that Southampton struggle against, because Southampton have Jan Bednarek, Jack Stevens, Yannick Vestergaard. You've got a collection of centre backs that are varying degrees of good in terms of running towards danger, but the moment they have to turn around and run towards their own goal, it's a massive trouble. And to Southampton's defence, this is a problem that a lot of teams in the league have. Manchester United don't have a centre back where if they have to turn around, things are okay. That's one of the big problems of Manchester United right now. They've got, if Harry Maguire has to turn around, I get quite nervous. And I think, Jan Bednarek gets a sending off against Manchester United because he had to turn around because Anthony Martial, very, very good dribbler. Sam Maximin, very, very good dribbler. And that's one of the weaknesses of this Southampton team is none of your centre backs can turn around and run towards their own goal. In theory, Salisu sorts this out. I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough of Salisu in the flesh yet to see. And his development or lack thereof is going to be one of the interesting stories for the rest of the season. I've got like a little list now that now it looks as if Manchester City are going to win the league and the bottom three are going to get relegated. I've got a list of things that are still interesting for the rest of the season. And one of the things on this is...
You don't think there's another twist or a turn in this league, Carl? You think that's it? It's all settled now?
I think it may be done. I think it's now a top four race, and then fun things like what position is John Stones going to play for England? Can Curtis Jones make it to the Euros?
Does Salisu exist?
Yeah, does Salisu exist? And other fun wrinkles like that.
To your point, Carl, about Southampton centre-backs, Bednarek is a funny beast, isn't he? Because, like, Saints fans, they criticise Jack Stevens gets it, doesn't he, in the neck? Like, he gets it, like, double barrels every time. And I think undeserved. Bednarek just gets away with, like...
Well, Tom, not only does Jack Stevens get it in the neck, now you've said that, the next time Jack Stevens makes a mistake, people will be targeting you on Twitter as well and saying, or they'll be sending me emails saying, I can't wait to hear Tom try and defend Jack Stevens in the next podcast.
But he's not. But Bednarek looks kind of. He plays every game on the raft, doesn't he? I think he starts if he's fit, he starts. Him and James Ward-Prowse will always play, but he does seem kind of hapless at the moment. He looks a bit lost. I mean, to your point about taking players out of the firing line, if we had another centre back, there's an argument you could probably take Bednarek out and just give him a break, because he looks kind of, that second Newcastle goal, he was all over the place. I don't know. Am I being too harsh on him?
No, yes and no. In that, I wouldn't say Bednarek is good or bad. I'd say it's quite unfortunate his recent knack for own goals. I will say he's an impressive young centre back with. I'm going to try and find a nice way to say this. He's got a clear talent ceiling, right? Like you can look at Jan Bednarek and go, you will be this good, and you might end up at a club in Champions League, but I don't think you're going to be a starting defender for a Champions League club, right? Like, you're this good right now, you will be this good in a bit, and that's fine. And maybe if you're playing an extra play with this skill, you might play for a team this good. And I think that's Bednarek. And I think the big thing about Bednarek is he's, what I call a meat and potatoes centre back, right? If you keep it in front of him and if you keep it in front of him and he's running towards danger and making fouls, and he's got loads of crosses to head away, no worries. If you've got someone like Anthony Martial, like Alan Saint-Maximin, like Miguel Almiron, like Marcus Rashford, if you've got someone who's like, I'm going to run towards you with the ball quickly, react, I think that's where things get undone. And I think what is particularly difficult about being a centre-back like that is that there are those sorts of players tend to play for very expensive clubs. And those very expensive clubs tend to have managers that have the scouting departments to go, you're not very good at this, so we're going to find loads of ways to pull away all of your support. So you don't have Yannick Vestergaard to protect you, you don't have James Ward-Prowse to protect you, you don't have Bertrand to protect you. We're going to find a way to exploit you and this weakness in a very specific way. It's my notion that defending hasn't got any better or worse in the last 15 years. It's just that we've given defenders so much to do that when they do get embarrassed, they get really embarrassed. And I think that's what happened with Bednarek. When Bednarek makes a mistake, it's an embarrassing mistake rather than a horrendous mistake. It's Bednarek, rather than a Bednarek, where were you? You weren't where you're standing, which I think that's the difference between him and possibly Jack Stevens, because there was definitely a point in time in Jack Stevens' career where he was not standing where he should have been standing. And now he's a lot better. And I certainly didn't see him being that much better throughout the 2019-20 season. I think he was one of the nice sort of surprises of last season. And the fact that he wasn't a starting option at the start of the season also speaks to the very other the very nice surprise that has been Yannick Vestergaard's form. So I think that's what's been going on. I think Southampton just have some very nice, well-meaning centre-backs who Ralph has described Bednarek as a firefighter before.
Yeah.
And yeah, look at a firefighter. They put out fires. But you only really need a firefighter when the fire's already happened rather than when there's smoke. And in a proper Hasson Hall team, the smoke doesn't really develop. So Bednarek's like, okay, cool. I'll just like stand here and wait until everything completely goes to pot. But because of accidents and injuries and whatnot, things are going to pot really quickly all the time, and he just looks a bit overwhelmed.
Okay, there we go, Jan. Tom, does that answer your question on Jan?
So should we focus on something positive?
Well, hang on, before we get onto something positive, okay, I just want to dwell on the negativity a little bit more. And it's about those plan Bs, because we've not had a plan B to stop the constant being beaten up, but also why are we not able to break down a team and score enough goals? I know there were things that happened, like Danny Ings hits the post, Ings is off form, Adams is off form. Sometimes there's just days where you just can't get that ball into the onion sack, as it were. And was this just a case of like bit of misfortune, bit of lack of clinical stuff, or is there a deeper issue? Because it's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last time, that we struggle to break down a team that we think we should, and where we've got the upper hand in a game.
Nice is the fun thing, because previously your plan B would be Shane Long, right?
Yeah.
It would be Shane Long, hoof it up to him, he's going to get the flick on, and then Redmond or Gineppo or whatnot would run onto it. Shane Long's now gone on loan to Bournemouth, so that nominal plan B is gone. And I think, again, this is the thing of having a manager like Ralph who talks about philosophy. He's much rather going to try and perfect that plan A than come up with a plan B. Southampton aren't going to have a plan B because Ralph lives and breathes and dies by that plan A. Why that plan A isn't happening right now, please forgive me. I'm about to compare Southampton to Liverpool. But I think it's a bit similar to the problem Liverpool are having in this COVID season, where there are so many games thick and fast, when you have less time on the training pitch, where not only are your players physically fatigued, but there's also just mental fatigue. I'm tired trying to watch every single game, let alone I don't know how players are tired trying to play in every single game. But I think there are certain players, the more explosive players, that are just off by 10 to 15% right now. You know, Danny Ings was a mid-table ranking deity and a real penalty box poacher and striker and able to do a bit of everything. And he's just 5% off it. And last season, that 5% helped him outperform his XG and helped him score goals like the one he did against Tottenham, and score goals where you're going, how on earth have you put it in that way? And the bounce isn't quite going for him. And you'll get these moments where Danny Ings is going to look mortal, and you're going to get those these bits where Nathan Redmond makes the wrong passing decision, and that can be very frustrating. Where you're like, oh god, 3 weeks ago you were able to make that pass, and I think it's not terminal, and I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I think what's really amazing is that we're just over halfway through the Premier League season, and I think this is the first time since the days of Claude Puel that Southampton aren't being mentioned towards the R word at all. I've just looked at 538, and the chances of you being relegated are less than 1%. So that's good, right?
Let's see if we can break that model.
Yeah.
So that's good. And I think I had Southampton finishing. So before the start of last season, I had Southampton finishing in 12th, and I think you finished 14th, 13th last season.
11th. 12th.
I can't even remember this anymore.
I don't remember last season anyway. So you can tell me, listeners. And I think this season I had Southampton finishing 9th-ish. Southampton finishing not in the Europa League, but sort of one of the best teams towards the Europa League. And I think that's more or less your level. I think if everyone's there and everyone's fit, Southampton are probably the 9th best side in England. The problem is a couple of people aren't there, and not everyone's fit. So I think, again, you'll probably be in this 11th to 14th place zone. And so that's fine.
It was 11th that we finished last season.
Lovely.
But I mean, that sort of wouldn't feel right, because I feel like we've improved from last season.
Yes. I think that's the feeling.
And I think that's why these 5 losses in a row in the Premier League are so hard to take as well, because it just doesn't. At no point, Tom, have we sat down and said, right, let's look at the fixture list. How many points are we going to get from those next 5 games? And gone 0.
Well, you don't, because you're a natural optimist as a football fan, maybe as a Southampton fan. But I think
Southampton fans are not naturally optimistic. Not in my experience.
Well, I think to your point, Danny Ings has now scored 1 goal, I think, in 10 games. And I think, Shea Adams hasn't scored since December. Redmond has just given up, looking like he's trying to even score, and hasn't scored 1 goal this season. Theo is injured for an indeterminate amount of time. As you say, Shane Long has gone on loan. I think, as well, to your point about Ings, last season Ings almost didn't seem to think, did he? I mean, he clearly was
He
thinking.
just scored.
He just scored. He's doing it so quickly in his head. And I thought the Newcastle game was fascinating, because you saw that chance in the first half where the ball breaks to Ings. And
he takes too many touches, doesn't he?
He's thinking. He's taking. Before he just hit it early, like Steve Ball or someone used to. But now he's thinking. And I think that they're all thinking. Like Shea Adams seems to be mindful that he's not scored in coming up to 2 months. And
now, it's really important. When you say they're all thinking, it's not just Southampton. It's everyone.
Right.
Right? I don't think there's the only player this weekend I saw not where like the cogs are visibly whirring in their head as they're taking a chance was Phil Foden. And that was for the final chance for Manchester City. Everyone is now going, what am I supposed to be doing? What day is it? What's happening? And I think that's just a knock-on effect of lockdown. That's a knock-on effect of it nearly being a year of playing football behind closed doors. And I think that's one of the big things about having no fans is that people would just, you'd normally have someone yelling at you going, oi, effing switch on. And it's just not there anymore. And everyone's just a bit sedated. And unfortunately, I think, this probably affects the explosive players more than non-explosive players. And it probably affects the players at the smaller clubs, because there's just the drop-off between being switched on and being switched off is just that much more noticeable.
Tom, I'm going to allow you to be positive now.
So, Minamino.
Is it Minamino or Minamino?
I'm calling him Minamino.
Minamino, he looks a hell of a player, doesn't he? I mean, the contrast between, Redmond is a whole, there's probably a book to be written on the enigma that is Nathan Redmond. But what was fascinating was Minamino comes in and just looks so effective so quickly after he can only have had 1 or 2 training sessions with him, but it just looks deadly and direct. And I thought he kind of, like, you wonder if a player like that is almost like the death knell for like a Nathan Redmond, not because he necessarily keeps him out of the team, but just because he just makes him look so much less effective. And it was a great goal. Like, credit where credit's due. That was a brilliant goal. And the comeback was on at that point, John.
It was. And that finish reminded me of Gabbiadini's first goal against West Ham. You know, that moment where we thought we'd signed a god from Italy.
Because we couldn't score at home, did we, for like 5 games in a row.
Yeah.
And then just 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Also, another positive, James Ward-Prowse is a free kick deity, if we are going to talk about gods here. That free kick, is that his best one yet?
I think so. What was weird about it, right, is he kicks it and then he pushes like the X button and the ball goes faster in midair. It's not going that fast. And he obviously then remembers to push X and it goes even faster as it arcs over the wall.
Is that your tip for scoring in FIFA?
That in the old days, you used to get on FIFA. They've wised up, but I think it was his best one. Yeah, I think it was because it was ridiculously far out.
I think I'm making a very educated guess that clubs must now be telling their players, do not foul Southampton players in these areas outside the penalty area, because James Ward-Prowse will score. One of my big worries before Manchester United played Southampton was the fact that James Ward-Prowse has scored 2 free kicks against David De Gea, and you could see before on the free kicks De Gea was going, he was animated in shouting towards his defence as to how he wanted that wall and how he wanted it set up, and that shot from Ward-Prowse, De Gea had to sort of punch over the bar. And I think that's another great thing about Ward-Prowse is he's going to get on target, and that's really scary. A lot of free kick takers are, you know, you've got free kick takers that use a knuckleball or try different techniques or try and side foot and whatnot. Whereas Ward-Prowse, you know, not only is he going to take a free kick, but he's going to get on target, and that's really concerning.
I think the way he describes it is just, it sort of speaks volumes. It's like, if I hit it how I want to hit it, then it doesn't matter what the keeper's done with the wall, where he's positioned himself, there is no way he can get it. Yeah. And I think that goal, that free kick against Newcastle, was perfect because you can't do anything to stop that.
He has got to free kick taking of a level that before the Shrewsbury Town one, I went, that's a goal. Because all he has to do is get on target, because this is going to, unfortunately, if there are any Shrewsbury listeners, I'm sorry, this is going to sound mean. I don't think Shrewsbury is ever going to have a goalkeeper that can keep out a James Ward-Prowse free kick. So he's got to a point now where it's just, you know, if you're a goalkeeper in the bottom half and he gets on target, you're in trouble. If you're a top half goalkeeper, I'm going to expect you to have to make an effort to save this. But I'm not expecting it to not go on target. I think what's really interesting now is Ward-Prowse went from taking maybe 20 or 30 free kicks after training sessions to taking about 6, because he is now approaching the stage where he doesn't want to waste time. He wants to be able to do it one and done, which is a real sort of sharp shooter. Not only is he good just in general around the penalty area, but he also has a special sort of in that left half space where, again, if I was an opposition scouting coach and I was up against Southampton, I'm going, here's how you get past your right back. Here's how you get past Romeo. Here's how you get past Bednarek. I'm going, in this area right now, you just don't touch anyone because Ward-Prowse will score.
The internationally recognised James Ward-Prowse zone.
Yes, this is Ward-Prowse country. Do not mess around in it.
But like, this is what drives me mad. Again, I'll go back to Redmond, and I do get mad about Redmond because I get mad about him because I really think he's got such talent when he does it. He's got such talent, but like, part of the problem is Redmond has stopped trying to beat his man on the left hand side, which means we're going to get fewer James Ward-Prowse free kicks because either, you know, James Ward-Prowse, either Redmond beats his man, happy days, doesn't beat his man, okay, or he gets fouled. 2 of those 3 are good outcomes. But like, if he's not trying to beat his man, we're deficient in that sense.
I think if Nathan Redmond had met Ralph Hasenhüttl 5 years earlier, things would be very different. I think when you look at Redmond's Southampton career and you look at the managers he had and the very contrasting styles and I think Redmond had 2 managers at Southampton that when Redmond arrived, the manager was like, okay, you're that sort of player. Just keep doing your thing and don't worry about it. And I think at a time when Southampton didn't really have much creativity and didn't have many ball carriers, Redmond had to take it upon himself and had to do everything. And not only was he responsible for trying to get goals and assists, but he also very often had to carry the ball 30, maybe 40 yards up the pitch for any sort of attack. And you could see it in parts last season where he'd get the ball and he'd carry it 30, 40 yards and you're going, pass the ball now, pass the ball now, pass the ball. He's not pass the ball and he's taking a shot. And you're going, why did you take the shot? If you just passed it, it would have been a 3-on-2, XYZ. And I feel as if you spoken to Redmond about why did you not pass it, Redmond would have probably told you, yeah, but a season ago, that person wouldn't have taken the shot or that person wasn't there. And I think a lot of the teething problems Redmond had on the Hasson was, one, understanding there were things he had to unlearn and that there were improvements he had to make in his game. And two, understanding he had to trust his teammates, right? He had to start releasing the ball earlier. He had to stop playing hero ball. And those things are going on. And I think what's happened now, again, I think the operative word you use when you describe Mino is direct, right? Redmond can be a direct dribbler, but he's also got some trickery to him. He likes a little sort of deceptive dribble as well as a direct one. And I think that the necessity of being a cute dribbler has gone away. And what you just basically want is just run in a straight line, mate. I just want you to run in a straight line.
Hit the byline. Just try and do it.
Get some chalk on your boots. And that can be difficult to do in a sort of intensive season like this and in a time when your confidence isn't great. And I'm sure it will come again. So in Redmond's first season on the Hasson Hall, he got 6 goals and 4 assists after December. And I think he had another miniature spurt in the second half of last season as well. He tends to be someone who comes hot in the second half of seasons. At least from my sort of experience of looking at him on the Hasson Hall, he tends to have a quiet first half of the season, and then he comes alive in the second half. So have faith in Nathan Redmond.
Yeah. The thing is, you get annoyed about it because he's really good.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, you wouldn't be annoyed if he was hopeless, would you? And he was just trying.
Yeah. He's really good.
Right. So, Carl, we had a question from Professor Simon Kemp. If you could give us 3 reasons why we should be optimistic, and if you can't, then please give us 1. And then if you can't see any reasons why Southampton should be optimistic, then I think he thinks we should just all give up.
So first things first, you're not going to get relegated.
So that's 1.
That's 1. Less than 1% chance you get relegated is number 1. I think number 2, there are so many. There's at least 3 players in Southampton that I just haven't seen enough of, and I'm really excited. Like this Diallo guy looks interesting. I want to see more. Yeah. I keep in the times when I can't watch the Southampton game and I see Ibrahim is in the starting lineup, I'm texting my Southampton friends going, how did he play? What is it? What's he doing? What's he up to? So I want to see more of him. I want to see some of Salisu. That's really interesting to me, right? A coach, someone at a football club in the Premier League, when the deal was made, went, wow, when sort of expressed positive thoughts on Salisu, 15 million, very interesting. He could cost 3 times that much if he has a very good season. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Salisu is going to be 45 million come the end of the season, unless he has an astonishing second half of the season. But he has the raw materials there to be a 40 to 50 million centre back, and I think he is under a coach who will give him the time and whatnot to develop. Please, I'm going to caveat this a little bit in that I went quite hard. I went to bat quite hard for Kevin Danzo last season, and I got that one a bit wrong. But I think Salisu is going to end up a bit better than Kevin Danzo. No disrespect to Kevin Danzo, who's doing quite well in Bundesliga too. So those are 2 reasons to be optimistic. And I think the third one is just James Ward-Prowse is going to the Euros, right? Like, your captain is going to go to the Euros and has a good chance of being a starting option for England.
Going to score what's going to happen though, isn't it? Like, we can already see this. James Ward-Prowse is going to be on the pitch. It's going to be the semi-final. We get a free kick in the 80th minute or something, which could either kind of get us equal or put us in the lead. and Eric Dyer's going to stand up and hoof it over the bar.
I'm glad you said Eric Dyer, because I thought you were going to go Kieran Trippier, but then I was like, it's good, because that's what we'll have. And Dyer, who has never scored a free kick,
Not in the Premier League.
Take that
Not
free
in the
kick.
Premier League in 12 attempts.
Yeah.
I think those are some reasons to believe. You've got two. At the very least, you've got two players who are making very strong claims to be in the plane, if not already on the plane. You've got two more players
to Wembley.
The plane to Wembley. You've got two more players who I think are genuine unknowns and encouraging unknowns in that sort of sense. You've got a less than 1% chance of being relegated. And honestly, I tweeted this to Alex Stewart in regards to Brandon Williams. So we were talking, I think it was a conversation back and forth about whether or not Brandon Williams would be better served staying at United or whether going off to Southampton. And I said, at this point, I would genuinely send next to any young player for 6 months to Ralph Hasson Hall, because Ralph Hasson's going to go, right, here's how the basics of football are done. I think there is such a good foundational knowledge on the basic education of football that Ralph Hasson can give you. That's been quite fun. I think Dan Ndulu is a lot of fun. He was just like one of the nicest people I met when I was down at Southampton, and sort of he's got like a really interesting body shape, in that I'm a pretty big gentleman. John, you've met me a couple of times.
Yeah.
So I don't often stand next to a football player or person and go, oh, well, you're bigger than me. But there have been 2 or 3 times where I was talking to Dan Ndulu, like stood next to Dan Ndulu, where I'm going, I feel like your younger brother. So he's a big guy, but I wouldn't. The interesting thing about him, he's not really a target man. He's got a very similar. Well, from what I understand, he's thought of in the same way that people think of Romelu Lukaku, in that he's a big gentleman, 2-footed, has surprisingly good creative play, has a very good football IQ. I think the world of him, really. He's just like, and not, while I may look like his younger brother, I look at Dan Ndulu and I'm like, ah, you're nice. I want to enjoy watching you play football for the next 10 years. So I think those are my reasons to be optimistic. I think you've got a fantastic manager. You've got some very interesting young players there. And you've got 2 players that are probably going to play for England in the group stage of the Euros. So it's going to be fine. Southampton will be like anywhere between 13th and 9th this season come the end of it.
Nice. I'll take that.
You take that? Well, we've been recording for 1 hour and 12 minutes now, and it would feel mean to keep you guys both for any length of time longer than that. But Tom and Carl, I always want to give you the opportunity to say something before we go. I mean, we haven't even talked about how we're going to knock Wolves out of the FA Cup this week, and then go on and win the trophy, and then forget about the 2 9-0s, because we'll be looking at our reflection in the silverware. How I could be optimistic at any point. But, you've talked us around there, Carl. I think you've maybe saved some of us from the brink. And if I was allowed to play like music on this podcast, which unfortunately Spotify and iTunes don't allow, I think I'd be playing Reasons to Be Cheerful, Part 3.
I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a good end to the season. And also, this may sound weird, not finishing in the Europa League might help a squad that is just a little bit thin right now. I think one thing about this Southampton was you're a little bit ahead of schedule, and you might have been incurring some of the penalties of being ahead of schedule, because you're like, oh yeah, we're going to play on the deck. We don't need crosses anymore. Shane Long might not be needed anymore. Whereas now, if you just keep bobbling on at a nice little rate, you don't need to get gassed come the end of the season. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Tom, are you feeling reassured?
Yeah, but I mean, look, it's a wobble, but you've still got Danny Ings, you've still got James Ward-Prowse, still got all the players, still got Ralph. Yeah, like it's exactly the same group of players. They're not become bad players. They're just having a bad run. Little Ralph will pick them up.
There you go. All good.
Well, there we go, listeners. I hope you've enjoyed that soul searching and hopefully some soul soothing. I realise that there's probably a lot of topics that you want us to get onto, which we just haven't even had the time to explore. So email us, saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com, and Tom and I will try and pick up on some of those topics. I think there might be some around ownership and how on earth we're getting VAR so wrong and all sorts of other things. But, send them our way, saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com. Carl, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for coming back. I hope one day we can have you back on the podcast and we can be sat here smiling at you and you have to wince at the start of the podcast because you know what's coming, but it's probably not happening this season, is it? And Tom, always a pleasure, never a chore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gents. We've got the St Mary's faithful to take us out.